Hey, it's Drybear, and Terminull Brigade is your next big obsession. This game is on the horizon, the demo is playable now, and today I want to talk through the 3 starter characters that you'll have access to before unlocking the others in the game, and I'll kind of walk through the gameplay mechanics as well, and how to play them. But first, what is Terminull Brigade? Well, it is an action-packed roguelike. It's going to have a ton of different interactions between your character-based choices, multiplayer, single player, and lots of power-ups and build combinations that you can create on your own to build your own playstyle. So you'll start with a character selection and choose your character at the start of a run, but throughout the run you'll be given tons of different power-ups and bonuses, as well as items called relics that will supercharge your playstyle as well. So as you go along, every run will be completely different from the previous one, and you'll start with the basis of the character that you have and be able to amplify or completely change their playstyle depending on what you're looking for. So even though a certain character may have a starting playstyle, depending on the choices you make throughout the run, as well as the power-ups and items you equip along with your character, you can end up creating some pretty wild things. You see on screen I'm playing the support character Aurora, but I was able to make some crazy room-clearing AoE DPS-focused builds with her, even though she does kind of play more in a support style. Now, when you're first starting out in your journey through Terminull Brigade, you will have choice of either Aurora or Colonel, and we'll start in order of the 2 characters you start with, but you will very quickly gain access to Blade as well. Now, that's not the only characters that will become available once the game fully launches. We'll have Colonel and Aurora first, then Blade, but there's also Mad Max, we've got Gloria, and we also have Hackness as well. So let's start with the backbone of Terminull Brigade, the character that just kind of a lot of people will resonate with at base. Colonel. Colonel is your quintessential FPS or third-person shooter, just your shooter-style character with a loaded AR, and he's very good at dealing damage from a distance. He has a way to drop down this big drone strike for his ultimate ability. He can shoot out these rocket strikes as well, and we'll talk about how to customize this in the build section as well. And he also has a personal shield with tactical shield. This allows you to just tank damage, and so he has ways to do AoE damage, good single target damage. He has defensive options and some good room clear or boss damage when you get to a boss as well. That puts his kit in a very well-rounded state. His passive rewards him for hitting weak points. Now, this includes headshots as well if you have enemies that have heads, but some enemies have weak points on their armor or shields or things that they carry that you can shoot, and you'll know because it flashes yellow when you hit it. Now, I think that Colonel is actually a very good starting point for any player that's starting to get into Terminull Brigade, just because he's got it all. He's got a choice for everything. You can choose to face tank some objects as well with his personal shield. He's got a really cool quick time reload, so anytime you see me reload with the assault rifle on screen, hit a little blue bar. If you hit reload again during that, it's a perfect reload, which will give you bonuses. By default, it can give you just a faster reload, but you can also modify it through the in-game systems to be able to give you bonus damage, AoE pulses, and explosions, or some kind of defensive options as well, which is really cool. But just by default, using his assault rifle to be able to clear rooms and keep damage up gives you a very flexible kit on top of that. Now, he also has the ranged rockets. Like, you can actually shoot the rockets forward. It has a charge system. You'll be able to use that repeatedly to shoot multiple rockets as well. At base, the rockets don't do crazy damage, but that's unmodified, right? You can actually go for a pure primary weapon build with Colonel that just focus on using his rifle, and you could just use his ultimate, the grenade that charges up, as well as the defensive shield, and just play like you're playing a third-person shooter and clear everything out in the room as well. But he does have this charge-based system, the max charges for his rocket launch, which is super strong. It gives you good options for dealing damage, but also has good options for applying status effects as well. You can run a build like this run. I was running a lightning build with Colonel, so as I got damage with my rifle, I was able to, you see the chain lightning bouncing between, and then I picked up even more lightning damage so that when I shot a target, it does single target burst lightning damage, which is great for clearing big elites or bosses and mini bosses, or just clearing rooms with a chain lightning as well. But you don't have to go that route as well. You'll notice I'll occasionally use my E ability here to shoot the rockets out. I didn't go for a full skill build this time around, but if you were, you can create a lot of awesome damage with that by increasing the maximum charges on his rocket launch, as well as applying status effects, Some status effects give you crazy damage bonus as well. So if you decelerate an enemy, if you freeze them or chill them, you will be able to increase your damage by multiple magnitudes. So like based on for every enemy that's nearby that is frozen or decelerated, you will get a massive damage bonus, which means that you can shoot the rocket out, freeze everyone, use your gun until it wears off, shoot the rocket out, and cycle through that way, getting lots of really good AoE like room-wide damage from that front as well. He's got a very flexible dodge roll, so if you press left control, you can dodge. His is a little bit further than some of the other characters, and it's incredibly responsive as well, which means that you have a very good weapons platform with Colonel that allows to play off of that as well. Now, his gameplay is going to change quite a bit depending on what Aeon perk you choose, whether it's going to be Fortune or Music, and depending on what you choose for the options that come along, you can play with more of a high mobility playstyle or a weapons-based playstyle, and you get a lot of damage out of that as well. That's just super easy. But I think a lot of people are going to gravitate for Colonel just for his pure assault rifle gameplay. I think you can just stack up bonuses when you use your weapon, bonuses when you hit perfect reload, bonuses when you are reload around enemies. You can cause like pulses that do tons of damage on top of that as well. You can even do like just very easy like procs that trigger off of fire rate. So like that little chain lightning bounce that I have is based on a chance to proc when you hit the enemy. But because he shoots so fast and hits so often, it's easy for him to be able to flex into that and trigger it over and over and over, which is just a very easy weapons build to start with. Now, when it comes to bosses, like the actual section bosses for Colonel, slow and steady is the name of the game. He's not going to be like bursting people unless you have a really good build, like in a couple shots, like some of the other characters, but his DPS uptime is really high and his steady throughput DPS is very respectable. And he's also one of the best characters for hitting weak points as well. Characters like Blade that do lots of AoE or they're fast moving strikes, or, you know, wind up a lot of charge ups for increased damage and then unleash it for a big blow. Sometimes it's hard for characters like that to be able to hit, you know, very precise or specific weak points on bosses. Depending on what boss we're talking about, you can see that Soulbinder has the big weak point on his belly, as well as his weapon when he throws it and things like that. But some characters have trouble hitting weak points. Colonel does not. He can be pinpoint right on that weak point and blow that apart very easily, which on some bosses can negate mechanics, skip entire phases, and also push you into a very, you know, valuable position to be able to win that fight just by using your main weapon on top of that. He's also very flexible. We talked about how good his dodge roll is, good amount of distance, very responsive and very fast, and he can just kind of punish enemies that get into it. And anytime you run into a mechanic that isn't like a very high damaging mechanic, he can just pop his personal shield up and eat it and walk right through it, which is super easy to deal with some of the bosses. Now, Soulbinder isn't the most complicated boss in the game. It's the first boss you'll run into in most cases, depending on your run. But some of the bosses get much bigger. They have much bigger arenas with lots of weak points in different parts of their body. And so being able to very easily hit the point that you want on the enemy and dodge and absorb damage when you need to means that he's ready for any single encounter. Moving on to Aurora. And I'll be honest, I kind of overlooked Aurora at first. I mean, she's cute and she's zippy and she's got a lot of attitude and she's very fun as she plays. But a lot of what she does is kind of like supportive or like, you know, changing the flow of the battle. So I didn't think I was going to be able to do the same kind of powerhouse builds that I was doing with Colonel and Blade, but boy was I wrong. So our ultimate is called a star-worthy performance, and this is just a big pulsing area. It's a force field for 8 seconds, and they will be afflicted with a status effect called stagnant. And during this, shots that hit the enemies have a 50% chance to trigger data stream, dealing additional damage. So she has this ability to deal some damage to enemies in the area, but she puts a debuff on them that if they get hit after the fact, they will deal additional damage as well, which is great because your teammates can proc this when you're playing in multiplayer and you'll be able to flex through that as well. A super strong kind of hybridized damage, but also very supporty style ultimate. Her primary skill is called Gotcha, and this is one of the most useful tools in any mobbing or PvE style content in any game ever, the ability to pull enemies together. So it has a vortex effect with this. You can get multiple charges of this ability as well. You shoot it out and it'll suck all the enemies into one spot, which is perfect for AoEs, grenades, popping things up and doing things like that. It's super strong, and it's also really nice when you have like drones flying in the air or little small enemies running around. You can just cluster them all together and then dunk on them in one spot, which is always very strong. Her minor skill is super fun. She flies up into the air and she maintains a certain height and altitude above the ground, and she can fly around and shoot. And then whenever she wants or when the timer ends, she will then dunk down and do AoE around her as well. So she'll be able to get up on the fight, cluster enemies together, pop debuffs, help teammates, pick off off like the snipers that are dealing damage to you and your teammates, deal damage that way, and then when you want to, you can dunk down and deal damage with the end of this ability as well. And her passive rewards her for actually applying crowd control on enemies. So if you hit any enemy that are controlled, you have a 20% chance to trigger data stream, which is that proc bonus damage that she gets from that. So she has a very nice, well-rounded kit from that standpoint. Now her primary weapon is a little bit more flexible, and that is kind of this channeled lightning beam, and you can cause this to have all kinds of effects on it as well. It is hit scan, so you can do headshots with it as well, doing bonus damage from that. But to my surprise, she actually has one of the best mobbing kits that you can see. So obviously at base, she has support abilities, debuffs, crowd control, things like that. But as you work through the perks and the relic set combinations and have the right power set up for your character, the fact that you can vortex enemies into one spot at will with multiple charges, you increase the amount of charges that the ability has. She has tons of mobility, which means it's very hard for enemies to hit her. If you play well and position yourself properly, you can basically avoid most damage in the game just by being very zippy and mobile. And if there's melee enemies, you can just fly up into the air and laugh at them while you're looking down on them as well. And there's also, because she has so many different ways to deal damage, she has so many vessels that can carry these perks and bonuses that you'll get through the Aeon system and perk system that can level things up. So like after dodging, you get bonus damage, or after you reload, you'll get a big pulse that explodes, or if you hit an enemy in the head, you can freeze them and then you can pop the debuff that you apply for yourself. Everything that works for support for her also works on herself as well, which means that she just makes herself stronger, and she just has this freedom of movement that no other character has, because she can go up into the third dimension, fly around, and just control space that way. She'll start a little bit slow compared to like a Blade or Colonel on the first level, but as you start stacking up more and more powers, the synergies become more and more obvious as she moves around the battlefield. And because she has a very good access to health and shields, there are actually some really strong defensive perks and bonuses that you can get, or even relic sets that like may start with a bonus to max shields and then give you bonus damage based on how close or far you are from the enemy as well, which means that as you start stacking up more and more of these, her defensive options become offensive options, which just gave her, you know, the perfect kit. She can't die, she's invulnerable forever, and she has crazy AoE damage and single target damage as well, while she's controlling the battlefield, applying CC to enemies, popping bonus damage as well, triggering special effects, and just moving around freely, laughing and giggling the entire time. In fact, I ended up getting so much damage from combining different effects together on Aurora that I actually didn't even need to use my ultimate ability on anything but a boss. I was doing so much room clear and you know, self-sustain and crowd control throughout the fights that I kind of just held on to my ultimate, and then when I got to a boss, that was the good time to dump it, because you'll be able to drop the ultimate on top of the boss, do lots of AoE damage, but also be able to apply that debuff, which gives you bonus damage on hits that are subsequent after your ultimate strikes as well. So for example, against Heimdall, which has tons of movement, he's actually kind of a tough fight for some of the slower characters because he has these big pulses, he does like ground shockwaves you have to jump over, he has these big projectiles that fly at you or fly across the ground, but because Aurora just flies, none of the ground AoE pulses can hit her. She can very easily avoid the charge attack, and then the projectiles that come at her, she could just dash back and forth, avoid them, sidestep them, move, and then again here we pop the ultimate, we see tons of burst. Look at his health just going down, 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 down. She can still target weak point with her channeled beam, which is really strong, and she's also super defensive and flexible in that she can take a little bit of damage, chip this here and there, and just get out of the way from enemies that are firing at her very easily and just control that battlefield. It's a very straightforward but super fun playstyle depending on what you go for. And of course, if you end up going the route of multiplayer, like playing with your friends, Aurora is going to be a perfect fit, because then you can kind of pull off on the damage build a little bit and focus more on CC, stun the enemies, you know, decelerate them, freeze them, trigger bonuses for your teammates, have all kinds of like really cool defensive options to keep your teammates safe and to avoid damage, and extend the fight longer and longer, which you will need on the nightmare difficulty and higher when the bosses and enemies start getting really scary. So having a pure support focused Aurora is awesome, but she's also surprisingly good in just solo clearing for damage output, and she's very fun to play and very fluid as well. Next up is Blade. She won't be unlocked right away, but you will unlock her through the daily login bonus or maybe some other special events as well, and I instantly fell in love with her playstyle. She is the sword master, so she has that giant sword on her back, back, but she has ways to play off of her sword, and her sword feels more like a burst of power, and she works that in with her little handheld SMG that she uses and her other abilities that scale up as well. Now again, her basic attack is her basic like SMG. She just fires this. It has a build-up rate, which means if you don't go all the way down to reload, she can just regenerate, which plays perfectly into her kit. You'll be switching between sword attacks and SMG for most builds, depending on how you focus on skill damage versus weapon damage, that sort of thing, but you kind of have that basic attack there. However, her left click fires the SMG, and her right click, her secondary attack, swings her sword. However, the sword swings have a charge count that will go on cooldown as well. So you have several sword attacks before you have to wait before being able to do it again, unless you have a really strong high cooldown build that allows you to play off that as well. Additionally, her ultimate is a crazy swordmaster technique that does ridiculous damage. I've been able to like 1 or 2 shot some bosses with a full skill build on this. She just pulps a giant circle around her. She does like the crazy quintessential swordmaster samurai thing where she just stands still and then sheathes, and then everyone around her dies, but does a large amount of damage, and each hit from the ultimate reduces the cooldown of her charge, like her dash attack, which she'll use quite a lot. So next is the dash attack. This is her shatter sprint, her minor skill. She can by default activate this. She'll lean down, dash forward, and deal damage to enemies in a row in front of her, and it'll go on cooldown. But you can add ultimate charges to this. You can even add the ability to charge it up and hold it for longer to do bonus damage. And again, when you do the ultimate, it lowers the cooldown of this dash as well. Her E ability is a ranged slice of her sword. It's a projectile that flies out and deals damage too. You can modify this to do whirlwind damage or knockback damage, or even block projectiles and destroy them, which gives her a nice ranged attack on top of that. And then her passive means that when she uses her E or her Q, it reduces the cooldown of her C. So you can see how all this comes together, right? You have the basic left click SMG, you have the right click for the sword attacks, which have a number of charges that you consume. However, when you use your E and your Q, you reduce the cooldown or add charges to your dash and your sword attacks. So you use sword attacks and then use the SMG to fill, then you go back to sword attacks, and they play off of each other, which means that she's constantly going between melee and range by her base kit, unless you do some crazy modifiers. Now, in my experience, she is a little bit squishier than the other two characters, but she plays off of this so well because she has so many disruption abilities by every time you hit him with the sword, and she has wild, super fast mobility. Every time you hit him with your melee attack or the ranged attacks, you can even get modifiers, like I said, that eat projectiles. So you throw out the slash and it destroys all projectiles in the air, so that she has she's a little bit squishier, but she also has the ability to destroy or prevent damage in really interesting ways that some of the other characters may not have access to. And the nature of Terminull Brigade, it being a roguelike, is that you get to play off of parts of the kit that you want. If you wanted to play a SMG wielding blade, you certainly could, and there's some good damage you can get off of that. My preferred playstyle is to play off the sword as much as possible, either by adding additional charges. By the way, you can add a whole bunch of charges to all of your melee abilities that have cooldowns, and then you can also get a modifier that makes it so that based on how many max charges across all your abilities you have, it makes you stronger as well. So a lot of times I'll use the SMG to just poke when everything's on cooldown, then I'll switch and use the sword attack as well and kind of dash forward and then go back to the ranged attacks to fix things up. And some of her blade attacks and dashes go up into the air as well. So when you find enemies that are floating above you, you can dash upward into them and deal damage in that way. You can trigger reload bonuses on the SMG and then use those bonuses for your sword attacks as well, and kind of just flex on them as you're moving through the battlefield. Now, this is the default C attack that just dashes forward. However, in this run, I did get the charge up ability, which means that you get to stand in place and hold her dash attack for longer, which gives you up to like multitudes of damage increase on her dash. And you can also get things where like when you dash through enemies, you freeze them or you shock them or trigger chain lightning off of it as well, get elemental bonus damage, or if you're running the Aeon perk that gives you music, you'll be able to do pulses and like these big AoE musical explosions as you're moving through as well. And the name of the game for the blade is just raw damage. She just does so much damage, it's nuts. She doesn't have the same kind of flexibility and survivability. It will rely a lot on your positioning and how you react to enemies and what you do with what your abilities are and your build is, versus, you know, characters like Aurora that might be able to just get out of the way, or characters like Colonel that might be able to just eat it with a shield or just natural defense. Blade really just needs to kind of play the field and use her positioning. As Ra's al Ghul once said, make sure you understand your environment environment, that is definitely Blade through and through. However, once you get to bosses, this is when things get really fun because she's able to do lots of AoE with her slices that do the projectiles in front, which you will need a lot of different mechanics depending on the boss you're facing. So if they have projectiles in the air, you have to shoot down and destroy before they reach you, or AoEs on the ground you have to get rid of. There's definitely some flexibility there to be able to play off of that. But you can see even with just the sword attacks, how much damage I'm able to do to the target. And because they're directional, you're able to aim the sword attacks. You can deal damage to some harder to reach weak points. So I talked a little bit earlier how Colonel can kind of pinpoint strike any weak point on a boss. You can see even with this worm boss here, there's a whole bunch, like all of these bits that are hanging off of him around his ears, the tubes, the pieces, the chest piece, all of those are weak points. So Colonel can hit those pretty easily. But you can see even with Blade, I can dash up into the air and strike them with that dash attack using the sword attack. And then just look at the ridiculous amounts of damage she can do. She's just such a powerhouse if you build her just right, which makes her super fun to play. So those are the three first starter characters for Terminull Brigade. This game is a ton of fun. If you like action games, if you like third-person shooters, if you like roguelike games, or just be able to create your own experience every time you run through the match, I think Terminull Brigade is a great fit for you. And those are the first three characters that you will be able to pick up and play, and generally kind of what I've found for their play styles and how best to utilize it. Check out the demo for a limited time, but just in case, so you don't miss the full release of the game, make sure you wishlist on Steam today. If you found value in today's video, leave a like down below, leave a comment for the algorithm to help this video get seen by more people, and don't forget to check out my other channels for other content and other stuff and other things.